Room 592 on CADRES Radio, the radio with a difference. Unleash the truth in Room 592. Room 592 every Monday to Friday from 19 hours 30 to 20 hours 30 with Dr. Yog Mahadeo and senior journalist of CADRES News, Leonard Gildarie. Room 592 on CADRES Radio, the radio with a difference.
It is 19 hours 25 in Guyana and right across the Eastern Caribbean. Hey, welcome down to the special edition of Room 592, where we unleash the truth. And of course, joining us this evening at the helm of the program is Dr. Yog Mahadeo, alongside his co-host, senior journalist Leonard Gildarie. And of course, they're joined by Sir Ronald Sanders and Mr. Peter Wickham. Gentlemen, a pleasant good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Mr. Joshua Van Slightman, and good evening, my co-host, Leonard Gildarie. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and a warm evening to you all. It is a day where a lot of things have happened, and I must say, we have two distinguished gentlemen in our room 592 tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We want to talk about what has transpired, what has happened today. More specifically, the reaction of these two gentlemen. Sir Ron Sanders, as you know, has been in the forefront in representing Guyana, representing democracy for Guyana, and representing also Guyana in an international light. And Mr. Peter Wickham has been evaluating what is happening in Guyana as far as the region is concerned. Ladies and gentlemen, Guyana is not an island on its own. It's not a country on its own. We are part of the region and we are part of the world. And so we have these two gentlemen here tonight. And let me say to you all, welcome once again to Room 592, where we unleash the truth. Ladies and gentlemen, today, 2nd day of August 2020, 5 months after the March 2nd, 2020 elections, we have had a declaration. And in swift order, we have had the swearing in of President Irfan Ali as the president of this cooperative Republic of Guyana. It's been a long 5 months. It's been a long, long time. And we have had a lot of things said about us as a nation. But I wish to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, today is not a day of celebration. Today is not a day of winner and loser. Today is the day when we almost decide that as a people, we are going to pick our country up, place it on our shoulders proudly, and walk to a future that we can create. And of course, the continued development of this country will be based on how proactive you and I are as people of this country. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again. And I would like to tell you that tonight we invited our guests to share with us their reactions as to the developments here in Guyana. And I would like to, as a matter of respect, as a matter of the hard work that he has done, to remember the impassioned plea made to the world in his presentation to the OAS, Sir Ronald Sanders. Ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to invite the comments of Sir Ronald Sanders first before we get into our discussion tonight. Sir Ronald Sanders, welcome once again, sir. And today is a different day, sir, than it was from the last time you were in Room 592.
Yes, indeed. And thank you very much for the invitation to appear tonight. Good evening to you, to Leonard, to my good friend Peter Wickham, whom I haven't seen for a long time, but I can see from this picture that he is in very good shape. Nice to see you, Peter.
Good to be with you.
Now, if I may, I issued a statement today to the general media about this election result, and with your permission, I'd just like to recall what I said in that statement. And it is this, that the result of the March 2nd elections, announced 5 months after they were held, is a triumph for democracy in Guyana. That it has taken so long and put the Guyanese people through so much emotional distress and tension is most unfortunate. But we must be thankful that the process has been peaceful so far and look forward to wise heads continuing to prevail on all sides in the months and years ahead. Guyana now stands on the cusp of a much improved economic future, with all the social benefits that should flow to all the Guyanese people. I congratulate President Irfan Ali and the PPP for their success at these elections. But the result should not be an occasion for triumphalism by the PPP. Instead, it should be regarded as a cause for celebration by all of Guyana, as the country takes its first steps up the ladder of expectation of a new prosperity in which every person in Guyana must be included. There are, of course, many disappointed supporters of APNU AFC tonight. But this happens in every contest. But there need not be absolute winners and absolute losers. In the coming weeks and months, the new PPP administration should establish modalities for participation in all government institutions by each ethnic group so that none feel neglected or left behind, and all become involved in the charting of the nation's future and in building it. And if I may say one final word, in the last few months of struggling to ensure the GCOM produced a result that reflected the national recount of CARICOM that was supervised by the Organization of American States. There was one man who was with us in that fight who unfortunately did not live to see this moment. It would have been a moment of which he would have been very proud, because he had always been with the Guyanese people, as Peter Wickham will attest in his days as Prime Minister of Barbados. But throughout this period, he has been a champion for democracy, for rights, and for the people of Guyana. But more than that, he's also been a champion for CARICOM values as expressed in the Charter of Rights. And tonight, I would like to remember Wayne Arthur. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Ronald Sanders. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed well said. And remember, Guyana is ours. Ours for the building, ours for the making, and ours meaning every single one of us. Sir Ron, you are so on point. This is not about PPP or APNU AFC and about winners and losers. It's about these peoples, the people of Guyana, and how we can move ahead. Mr. Peter Wickham, welcome once again, sir. I must tell you, my brother, for a moment, well, not for a moment, for a couple of days, I was highly suspicious last week that Trinidad would have had its August 10th election and have its prime minister sworn in before our declaration. But you know what? We beat you guys to it, Peter. We finally did something. Peter, what are your
I don't know why he's identifying you with the Trinidad and Tobago, but there you go.
That's no problem.
How much of a Caribbean man you've become.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, I often use the word we, and I think I may very well have used the word we when I referred to Trinidad and Tobago last time. But I too am quite happy that Trinidad and Tobago has not come and gone, because we recall that St. Kitts came and went, and Guyana was still waiting. And it would have been tragic if Trinidad and Tobago had come. So yeah, it's a happy moment tonight. I certainly identify entirely with Saron's comments regarding this whole need to avoid the triumphalism, because I understand the APNU AFC supporters. A lot of them feel extremely dejected tonight. I, of course, have my own views about the extent in which they were taken to a place where they need not have been taken. I do feel this whole situation could have been handled a lot better. But nonetheless, we are where we are. And, you guys have a country to heal. And I think that the healing is absolutely important, because every one of those people who went out there and supported APNU AFC has as much right to participate in whatever goes on from this point onward as the PPP civic supporters. And, you have to ensure that you prove them wrong regarding their concerns about being denied access to everything that was available in Guyana. And it's incumbent upon you to do so. My concern was what changed, what happened, because I was a bit surprised when I did not see an appeal forthcoming to the CCJ. And I admit tonight that I was also wrong, because I had anticipated several other legal challenges, because these guys were clearly digging their heels in. Something obviously happened after the second High Court appeal court judgment. My sense is that perhaps the legal luminaries advised about the extent to which this whole thing was futile, and the justices were clearly becoming somewhat irritated by having to go through this process over and over again. And it was becoming obvious that it was going nowhere.
Right.
And, I kept hearing about the same decision being made over and over again. And I think the Chief Justice was very clear in her presentation about the fact that this needs to be brought to an end. So I'm happy that this is what has happened. The question from me, the only other issue that I wonder about, though, is how will you treat to the renegades, Mingo and Lowenfield? Those two people to me are the two individuals who have stuck their necks out most. And even in his final declaration, Lowenfield still started to speak about the extent to which he wasn't confident in the results. He's facing criminal charges already, and quite frankly, I think that's highly appropriate. So I'm anxious to see how that will be dealt with. But yeah, the politicians did what they had to do, and I'm anxious to hear them sit in Parliament now. I'm confident that these guys will probably not have a bright future in Guyana's politics. But again, they've blocked themselves into that situation. But I think that we have to ensure that the people, the rank and file supporters of the APNU AFC, are not made to suffer as a result of this. But guys, congratulations. I'm so happy tonight that we are in a better place.
Thank you, Peter. And let me just make one correction. So indeed, when I said you, I meant the rest of the region, right? So
that's right.
I did.
That's right.
So we also have tonight Mr. Winston Rogers, Ossie Rogers, joining us. Ossie, how is the diaspora tonight? The Guyanese over in Brooklyn, New York, all over the place there. I see you wear your red shirt tonight, sir. Wow. How is it? Tell us what's the mood there like.
We in the diaspora, of course, I speak for, I was corrected one time on a program that I do not speak for everyone in the diaspora, but I know I speak for every Guyanese who has Guyana at heart when I say that we in the diaspora are extremely, extremely happy that this process has been brought to an end. I will take my party hat off here and put on my Guyana hat, a hat I wear proudly, and I'm always willing to share that that Guyana Guyanese with the rest of the world. So I will take off my political hat here and say that as Guyanese, we are happy that this process has been brought to an end and that our country can move forward, because we know of the suffering that our people of every color, PPP, APNU, and everybody else, the suffering that they would have been facing. I am in Queens, New York at the moment. I'm in Liberty Avenue, which is considered a little Guyana. And it is very festive out there, notwithstanding, of course, the COVID-19 the COVID-19 precautions that were put in place or rules that were put in place. But our Guyanese are very, very excited that our country, not, again, I understand that we're not, some of us are not really celebrating because of our party color, but because Guyana, because of the 5 months that they've been through, Guyana is finally able to breathe again.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, Ossie Rogers, for that. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, indeed, it is not a celebration for a particular party, but finally we were able to put over 150 days of an election process behind us. Sir Ronald Sanders, sir, today marks a special day also from a different perspective. So Peter, for example, mentioned that there would have been persons who have held up these processes, sir. Earlier today, when Leonard and I were on Elections Watch, the discussion was raised about the matter of sanctions. Sir Ronald Sanders, with your experience behind you, sir, could you say that now that the declarations have happened, those persons that might have faced individual sanctions, are they going to now be free to reapply? Would the international community continue to have any hold over their personal life, sir?
Over this particular matter, I doubt it very much. Those visa restrictions called sanctions that were applied to certain individuals, but I will remind everybody that nobody knows who those individuals are except the United States administration itself. But I doubt that they will now pursue those. They were proffered as a sanction against those who were being recalcitrant in this process and holding it up. It was done as a warning to them not to continue, and to tell them that if it continued to the point where the situation in Guyana became very difficult, in other words, if we had a government that was not reflective of the national recount result, then those sanctions would have been escalated. But I see absolutely no reason why they should continue in the present circumstances, unless, of course, there are any remnants, any rump of that group of people who were so intent on holding on to power that they feel they must resort to some other means now. I hope that does not happen. I hope, as I said, that wise heads will prevail, that people will now accept the result for what it is. Former President Granger said that the APNU AFC will still exercise their right to take what they consider to be irregularities to the elections court, and that is the right thing to do. If this matter, if they are so convinced, as I said on this program once before, of the rightness of their position, then the court is where they should take it with the evidence for that matter to be arbitrated properly. And so far, we have seen, for the most part, the courts in Guyana behave properly with, of course, one or two exceptions. And we've seen what the Caribbean Court of Justice had to say about this matter. So it demonstrates that justice is possible, and that justice can prevail in the end. So I hope that if it is that people feel that they still have something they have to prove, they do it in the proper place. And that is the elections court.
Thank you. And Sir Ronald, I want to read something to you and Peter and Ossie, and not necessarily to seek your reaction, but to just let you know the state of play in Guyana. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joseph Harmon, who was the election agent of APNU AFC, he said the following about half an hour ago. He said, I quote, "Today is a sad day for democracy, rule of law, sovereignty, and independence in Guyana. One day after observing the anniversary of emancipation, fraud has triumphed over justice and truth and has ensconced itself in the highest office in our land. People are angry, hurt, and disappointed, and I can empathize with that. President Granger has, on our behalf, issued a statement. So I issue this statement as the former election agent of APNU plus AFC and in my own right as a Guyanese citizen. He then went off for the next two paragraphs to speak about the 217,920 votes and about evidence of dead persons. He concludes by saying, we will continue to demand justice and equality for Guyana and a strong voice in how our resources are allocated to both foreign and local entities. We will continue to demand the good life without fear of persecution or prosecution. I wish the new president well. At least the note ended well. I wish the new president well. But the aforementioned paragraph, gentlemen, it does not speak to what I would have personally want to have seen reconciliation. Your thoughts, please.
Of which one of us?
You first, Sir Rana.
Look, Mr. Harman's statement is unfortunate in many ways, but of course, none of us need fool ourselves or anybody else that one of the driving forces behind 150 days that we have gone through was Mr. Harman himself. So it is not surprising that somebody who, in fact, contributed more than anyone else to this long, arduous, painful, emotional, stressful process that Guyana has gone through, would make that kind of statement. He clearly feels lost. All that he had tried to achieve, by every means he had tried to achieve it, has now failed. He has to tell the people that he urged to protest, to stand outside places, to continue to believe the narrative that there was fraud in this election. He can't walk away from that now. So I think people must recognize it for what it is. And if anything, Mr. Harman can be forgiven for his passion over this matter, demonstrated in this way. If one understands that he has such a fundamental position that he can't easily walk away from it, particularly as he tried to convince so many other people, and in fact did put a lot of people's welfare at risk by putting them on the street at a time of COVID-19, at a time when they should not have been gathering in that way. So all of that said and done, I frankly have sympathy for one or two other paragraphs that in the text that you just read. Not only his congratulations to the president, but also his affirmation that his party will continue to fight for Guyana's sovereignty and its economic interests, and will want to be sure that the resources are spread evenly. I'm paraphrasing it now, but I think generally that's what he was saying. Yeah. And that he wants to ensure, and I assume he's talking about the oil sector, that there's a fair deal for Guyana and everything that it does. And I think that is the role of a responsible opposition. So the APNU AFC should carry out that role, and they should carry out that role vigorously. So I have no problem with those paragraphs either, though I do believe the earlier paragraphs were, as I said, a manifestation of his own sense of righteousness and trying to convince people that he's still right, despite all that has proven him now to be wrong.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Peter, same question to you in terms of your reaction to Mr. Harman. And also, Peter, in your experience and what you have seen across the Caribbean, here is my question to you with the following backdrop. Guyana now has a new president. Anything or almost a lot of the things that the new president and his government will do will be evaluated against party loyalty, appointment, or victimization for those who will be disposed. What would be your words of advice in terms of what would have transpired elsewhere on these things, sir?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm happy that Sir Ron went first because he's a diplomat, and I think that diplomatic language eludes me. when I think of the role that Harman has played, I thought he was grossly irresponsible. And I've been concerned for a long time that Harman and others have basically pushed the supporters of Guyana's APNU AFC out on a limb so far that it is almost impossible to climb down. And the only way they will come down is if the branch is chopped and they fall and they smack themselves in the head. The extremity of the position that he has taken is extremely irresponsible under the circumstances. And the fact is that he can't climb down. And that's essentially what you have heard today. We believe that there were rumors for a long time that President Granger was anxious to deal with this matter before. President Granger was seemingly interested in taking this type of path. And there were a set of people who were telling him, absolutely not, under no circumstances. And I mean, we were hearing the posture from Harman, almost as though he was president. I am now convinced, based on that kind of statement, that this was a reality and that we probably would have had this settled 3 or 4 days after the election if President Granger had his way, because he clearly seems to be far more conciliatory than the rest of them. Now, I do feel that he has demonstrated very poor leadership, because I think that part of his role as a leader would have been to push people like Harman along a line that says, look, guys, we cannot go down this road. It's just far too dangerous. So there's a dimension being created where you have Harman on one side and you have President Granger and others on one side. There's a conservative side that says, okay, guys, let's deal with this in an election petition. And certainly if the case for the election petition was as strong as they say it is, I don't believe that Harman would be that concerned. You know, the reality of the situation is that I'm confident that this election petition will not go anywhere. You know, it's difficult to produce 115,000 death certificates or 115,000 exit certificates from the airport showing that people were overseas. This overwhelming evidence that they had, if it was as overwhelming and easy to demonstrate as it was, then I suspect they would have been willing to do this a long time ago. So what we will probably have is a constant refrain, and that will continue going on. We just had St. Kitts and Nevis, where 6 election petitions were filed for the 6 seats that were lost right after the election was held. I'm sorry, not 6, 8 election petitions, and all of them were withdrawn, and we were told they were withdrawn because of a technicality. My sense is that the situation in Guyana is going to continue for a long time with them making this election petition case. Election petitions tend to be a little bit on the slow side, and they will continue to fight, and this thing will go on. As to the impact it will have in terms of decisions that are being made, I have noticed that there are mature democracies. So in the United States of America, well, this is pre-Trump, not post-Trump. You would find a situation where an election will be held, you have a concession, and the new leader will say, I will work to ensure that the country remains successful. In Barbados, we had a situation where an election was held. Prime Minister Stewart lost the seat, and he said, I will work with Prime Minister Motley to ensure that Barbados remains successful. But then there's some other countries, like the same St. Kitts and Nevis, where up to now, we have not had a concession from former Prime Minister in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I'm seeing the same situation here, where you get a kind of a concession from President Granger, who says, okay, we will move to another level. But then you have people like Harman that are just not conceding. So I think that you're going to sit tight and buckle your seatbelt for the next 5 years. Every decision that President Ali makes will be disagreed with. Every appointment that he makes, we will be told that it is based on either race or political opportunism. Every decision that he makes will be double-checked and side-checked, and there will be questions raised as to legitimacy and authenticity of everything that he does. And this is going to go on and on for 5 years. I do not expect them to be a mature opposition. I expect them to be as immature an opposition as they were in terms of a government that was fighting. And I think the future is going to be a slow and painful climb. Now, the next problem we're going to have is another election will be due very shortly, because 5 years goes quickly. And my suspicion is that these same characters will return and will attempt to represent themselves in the same way. And my humble opinion is that politically, all of these guys are dead. You know, there's really no future for any of them in politics. But the problem is that the pangs are going to be painful, which will mean that they'll be fighting and they'll be scuffling and they will be going on and on. when what they really need to do now is clear the decks and let a group of young, exciting supporters and politicians on the other side come in and start to make this Guyana now a new kind of democracy that is really about the future. But I don't expect any level of maturity from them because I haven't seen it yet, and I expect them to continue that way.
And if I
Right.
may,
Thank
Yog, if I
you.
may, good night, gentlemen. That's an interesting couple of points here from Mr. Wickham. But I would like to know your thoughts, gentlemen, on the future of the Alliance for Change.
So I would like to get in there because I would want to answer your question. And I know earlier I did not uh, salute the other members of the panel and you guys. So my salutations to you guys. Um, Before I answer that question, I want to deal with the statement by Mr. Harmon, though, and I would put it out there by asking a question. Isn't this typical APNU PNC uh, statements where they say one thing and in the exact same statement is something totally different? Because he started off with all these things and then he ended up wishing well. Similar thing. It's continuous with the PNC. This is how they have been all the time, and I do not see any change with them as it relates to the Alliance for Change. The Alliance for Change has already committed suicide prior to this election. When they decide to go alone in the local government elections, they have given the Guyanese an opportunity to see where they committed their suicide and where Guyanese cannot trust them anymore, because the Alliance for Change, one would remember that the Alliance for Change was saying that they will never collate with the PPP or the PNC just weeks before they collated with the PNC and joined the APNU. So they've committed suicide. The Alliance for Change strongest donors were living right here in South Richmond Hill in Queens, where I am, and they've all bolted for the door before the last local government elections in Guyana. So they've committed suicide, and they gave Guyanese and the rest of the world an opportunity to see that by their poor performance in the local government elections. So they're done. There's no coming back. They were kept on, and the APNU put on this facade as though there's an Alliance for Change, but there was really no Alliance for Change. They were just using, and I hope that this doesn't come across wrong, but they were just using Moses Nagamutu and Kemrat Ramjitan for their ethnicity. That's all it was.
But Ossie, if I may, now let me put this to you. I like your point where you're going, but here is my counter. Guyanese politicians have been blessed with some kind of resilience that I think you don't see in many other countries, and that is by the goodwill of racial voting. Look, the PNC, after 28 years of ruling, they still end up, you know what is the tally? 32 for APNU AFC, 1 for the Join the Party, and 33 for the PNC, PPP. So notwithstanding this 5 years, there is still a majority, but there, just a one-seat majority. It has not shown that the Guyanese public was willing to say no to APNU AFC at all. Now, my question to you is, has APNU AFC, has the AFC killed the AFC, or has it more dented the chance of a third force? Because certainly I think AFC has realized that their future lies in the bed with APNU and the coalition. Back to you, Ossie, and then we'll go to Sir Rod.
Well, I think that they have done both, but as it relates to the third force, this is the second time we had a formidable third force that sold its prospects to the PNC. The PNC has some special kind of trickery within its hat that they are always able to get a third force to join with them, and then they are able to somehow get these guys to morph into the PNC.
But then you can't blame, sorry, Ossie, I just want to take the discussion further. And so, Ron, I want to come to you next in terms of this. You cannot blame the PNC for being smart, just like how I think Mr. Nigel Hughes said that the person that the PNC, APNU, AFC underestimated was Barra Jagdeo. So, Ron, the split is 33-32. I mean, in terms of 33 PPP, 31 APNU AFC, and 1 the join the party. But it does not speak of a population that says, well, APNU AFC has been so bad that we voted them out of power. It probably speaks of something else. And what's your thoughts of the question Leonard asked, sir, with the fortunes of the third force vis-a-vis also AFC?
Well, you see, I have to say that I've never bought into the myth that APNU was anything else but the PNC. So the little parties that joined in this coalition, and the party with which I was most disappointed, frankly, in the coalition was the Working People's Alliance, not the AFC. Because who was the AFC? The AFC had Raphael Trotman, my very good friend, who, as you will recall, was an active member of the People's National Congress, and at one time was aspiring to be its leader. And in fact, found himself in the AFC because that opportunity seemed to have slipped from his grasp. So there was a certain disgruntlement in his joining the AFC. Then there was Ranjitan, who himself was a disgruntled member of the People's Progressive Party, and wanted and went into a party as much in search of vengeance for the fact that he was tossed aside by the PPP, and to try to establish that he was still some kind of political force. The one genuine AFC person, when that party was functioning as the AFC, in my view, was Sheila Holder, the late Sheila Holder, who I think had a genuine desire to build a multiracial party in Guyana that would offer an alternative to the politics of the PPP and the PNC, which continues to be rooted in race. And the PPP, just like the PNC, did in the civic part of its coalition try to suggest that it had broadened its base beyond its traditional support. But I was never convinced that the APNU was anything else but the PNC calling itself APNU. And the AFC was as an appendage of people who were themselves so ambitious that they were tying tying themselves to that mast to progress. It was bound to disintegrate. And the AFC stopped being an AFC and started to become very much the PNC. And I can tell you that in the last few months at meetings of the People's National Congress Executive, did you hear what I say? I didn't say the APNU Executive. I said meetings of the PNC Executive. AFC members turned up there and were more vociferous about resistance and drawing this matter out than were executive members of the People's National Congress. When President Granger told people that he had packed up his office and left, and Valda Lawrence did the same thing, so did other ministers of the government. It was AFC people. No, Ranjitan, in fact, did pack up his office too, until Harman pulled him back to say, we have a chance, so don't give up so easily. We can drag this thing out forever. But the point I'm making is that the AFC is now a spent force. I don't think we will see it come back. The one thing that the problem this group is going to have in opposition, it is that the APNU AFC is what is elected to parliament. So they're going to have to, whoever the leader of the APNU AFC is going to be after Granger goes, is going to have to try desperately to keep that together. But I don't think it will work. And I think what will emerge is a stronger PNC out of this, recognizing that it carried the APNU AFC in any event. I don't believe in the last election, for instance, that it was the AFC that caused certain regions to go against the PPP. I think it was more annoyance with the PPP and disgruntlement that led to that, rather than the belief that Moses Nagamutu was somehow going to deliver Berbice and the quarantine. I thought that all of that was just mythical stuff. But I expect APNU AFC to struggle to remain as a party in the coming years. I think we will see it disintegrate. It's only their presence in Parliament, because that's who got elected, that will keep that name going. But AFC will vanish, and we will see a PNC emerging once again. That's my own view.
Great, thank you. Peter, 150 days. What has really taken a lot of blows in Guyana is the confidence people have in an election machinery. How do you reconcile that Guyana can rebuild confidence in an elections commission, a secretariat, commissioners? How much does Peter Wickham reckon Guyana will have to work to really get a respectable commission back in place? And is it really possible within, let's say, 3 years? Because we got to get our registration done. We got to get a lot of stuff done. So cater 2 years before the next election that we have to get a commission in place. How hard of a work do you think it will be, sir? Is it impossible?
It's going to be an enormous task. And I think that is part of the reason that I do feel that the injury that these guys have done to themselves as a country is tragic. Because you have a situation where I don't know of any other country in the Caribbean where you have employees of the Electoral Commission who are normally jealously guarding their ability to properly manage an election, coming out and saying that we can't manage an election. So you have a situation where the chief elections officer, who is normally the person that is in the vanguard of saying, look, I know what to do, I can do my job, saying, I can't stand by these results because the whole thing is bogus, which essentially means it's a self-indictment. And that's the part of the injury that you guys have done to themselves that I don't know how long it's going to take for them to recover. The CARICOM team has been useful to you in that they have given you a clear indication that there needs to be an audit internally. Certainly, Mingo and Lowenfield have to go as a matter of priority. The Elections Commission will need to dismiss the two of them because they've discredited themselves. And there are other individuals on the inside that you will have to look at. I do hope that Claudette Singh agrees to remain, if for no reason other than the fact that it was so difficult to find a commissioner that everyone agreed with. And I don't think that anybody, I shouldn't say anybody in their right mind, but there are very few people in Guyana who are qualified that will want to take on a responsibility like that. So I do hope that she stays as she helps to do the kind of audit that is necessary to rebuild GCOM back to a stage where credibility rests with it. But you have 4 years, and as you said, you have a lot to be done in that time. These guys told a lot of lies. This idea that your electoral list in Guyana was more bloated than any other. I was having a conversation with some people in St. Lucia recently, and they were talking about the fact that their list almost matches the size of the country. I know in Barbados it's the same thing, in Jamaica it's the same thing, in Trinidad it's the same thing. But yet these commissioners were out there walking about saying that the fact that the list in Guyana was almost the same size as the population was evidence of fraud. And I have continually said that that is not true. But those are the kinds of lies that is going to be very, very hard for them to run away from. And they have to construct this whole process and try to rebuild it. But it will take time. But I do feel that Claudette Singh has demonstrated that she is the right person to start the process again. I just want to make a very quick comment about the parties. The PNC, in my opinion, was struggling for a while. And I felt that coming out of the 90s, the PMC was doomed to failure. And what little association I had with that organization, I've made the point that you either have to rebrand it or alternatively, you have to move away from it. The PNC has a history of the Burnhamite years. And I feel that it took Guyanese a long time to forgive them for that. To me, the Alliance for Change was a golden opportunity to be able to take the moderate and progressive elements of the PNC out and present them in a way that they could say, okay, let's drive the change. It may not have worked out that way, but I do feel that the AFC was well-intentioned. And my sense was that certainly when I did polling in Guyana, they had influence among the younger professionals and the independent thinkers. And they were critical in terms of moving that group forward. And I was really hopeful for the ANC. The fact that Sir Ron is saying that the AFC was actually some of the hardliners now surprises and disturbs me. And if that's the case, then that organization is in the toilet. So coming out of all of this, I am even more convinced that the PNC brand is damaged. I do not believe it is a brand that can be rebuilt because it had problems before. They failed in the opportunity to do that. And my sense now is that maybe there needs to be a new force, a new alliance for change, some kind of a new ethos that emerges. I don't know whether you can rebrand the PNC, but we move from the PNC to the PNCR and now to APNU. And I think that the further away you move from that label, the People's National Congress, the better, and the faster that it happens, the sooner you will be able to get back to a situation where you have an alternative political force in Guyana.
Thank you, Peter. Ossie, the PNC, as Peter rightly said, the PNC moved from PNC to PNCR. And I think at one time they were PNC R1G. And I think a lot of people made a lot of memes with that saying RIG, R1G, PNC.
Very correct, yes.
So, Ossie, Guyana has seen another thing that emerged from these elections. That is the men and women from the new parties. They didn't do well at the polls, but subsequent to the polls, they really stood up. I certainly believe, and a lot of people believe, that had it just been the PPP and PNC, there might have been a different outcome. But it was because of the persistency of the smaller, newer parties on the bloc that added to this realm of integrity and to this fight. What are your thoughts, or do you think that the smaller parties can have a groundswell coming up to another elections? And mind you, LGE is in a year's time.
Well, my opinion on that is that indeed, for the independent thinkers, the smaller parties helped to add credibility to the argument, because it was an argument of the PPP saying one thing, and of course the PNC saying another thing. And of course the world rallied behind what the PPP was saying because it was the truth, and it was the truth that could have been proven easily. But the smaller parties, for those people in Guyana who shut off, some independent thinkers, sometimes they shut off to listening to one side or the other. And I believe that because the smaller parties were so were out there every day pounding that message, they have certainly added credibility to the argument, and they have certainly assisted greatly in this fight. But as it relates to the smaller parties, as it relates to the smaller parties, I would say that we will have a similar issue again, where people will be reluctant to trust a small party, because from the time that they start to gain momentum, we have experienced it twice in our country's history, with the United Force and then the Alliance for Change. The WPA was getting some traction too, but it was alleged that the same PNC removed the leader of the WPA, who was the dynamic leader that caused that party to gain some traction. So both times in our history that a smaller party gained some traction, and independent thinkers were looking at those parties, they sold out their fortunes to the PNC. The question is why?
Correct, indeed, Mr. Rogers. And Sir Ronald Sanders, sir, next year, I believe there should be local government elections in Guyana. I think if the last LG didn't prove the point, and the current general elections and regional elections did not prove a point, the next one certainly may define what would be the new political faces in terms of parties for Guyana. Sir Ronald Sanders, do you feel that, given the PNC's history in Guyana, the LG may well provide the opportunity for the newer parties to emerge and take that place possibly. Because, sir, my question is based on the following. Any country, including Guyana, we need a good opposition, don't we, sir?
Yes, you do. And I am very hesitant to discount the PNC as any kind of spent force. And while Peter talks about the Barbados years, and I know in the Caribbean, there is a view that Burnham represented such autocracy and so many things that were anathema to values held by people in the Caribbean, that everything he did, or almost everything he did, was bad. But I don't believe that that is a view that is held by the hardcore PNC supporters. And to this day, there is an enormous amount of respect and admiration for Burnham. And incidentally, that respect and admiration is not restricted to people who follow the PNC only. There are others who now openly say that some of the policies that Burnham had tried to introduce that people found unpopular, including when he banned certain products from coming into the country, which was interpreted at that time as a wish that he had to punish people, particularly when he banned wheat and flour. And it was interpreted by certain sections of the Indian community as an intention to punish people so that they could not make roti. When in fact, the reason why he did it was that the sugar prices had fallen out of the bottom throughout the world. Guyana had gone from being one of the countries that had huge foreign reserves into a country that had very little foreign reserves. And what he was trying to do was to preserve those foreign reserves by stopping the importation of goods that Guyana did not necessarily need to survive. But people thought that when he banned apples, for instance, and grapes, that this was a great punishment. When in fact, what he was saying is that we in Guyana produce enough fruit that we don't need at this point. We can do without apples and grapes in order to retain the revenues we need to do other things. But there is still an admiration for him, even amongst young people. So I would not dismiss I would not dismiss the PNC as a continuing force in the country. There is one thing that Peter said that I want to take up, however. He said that I may be paraphrasing him, but he would like to see younger people take up the mantle of politics to replace this lot that we have had now for some time. I agree with that. And it is not that Guyana does not have very capable young people, incidentally, of all races. We have produced some remarkable people throughout the world and throughout history. That Guyana continued to produce those people even in circumstances where its economy went into such decline, that its educational system fell with it. But yet Guyana could produce people who could be the top of the CAPE exams every year, that could go on to universities and Harvard and elsewhere and win scholarships and top prizes. Tells you that there is an innate ability in people, and that those people they were not constituted by a single race. They were people of all kinds. And I do believe that there are young professionals in Guyana of all races who have the capacity to build a different kind of political movement. But it is going to take time. And it is going to take them standing up to the leadership of both the dominant political parties if they want to break through into making Guyana really a country where race is less of an issue and development becomes what they want. So I would hope that the young people do in fact do that. If I may say one thing on the Elections Commission incident. I think the Elections Commission as it exists should be torn up, root and branch. The whole bloody thing should be thrown away. No Elections Commission, which has appointees of an equal number of the political parties can ever expect to be truly independent. You may find a chairman who exercises independence, but once that chairman is hobbled by people who are there not because of any other thing other than the protection of their party's political interests, that elections commission is not going to function. And in my view, one of the first things that the new government needs to tackle, and it needs to tackle it in consultation with the opposition parties that are in parliament, is the idea that the elections commission process has to be reformed, that the appointment of the elections commissioners and the chairman of the commission should not rest in the hands of the president and the leader of the opposition, deciding who it should be, that should now become a matter in the same way as we appoint the justices of the Caribbean Court. Governments have nothing to do with the appointment. People from the University of the West Indies, other law faculties, the bar associations, CARICOM Secretary General, private sector of the Caribbean, those are the people who meet to decide who these judges should be. And therefore, they look for the most independent people they can find. I'm sure that prime ministers, if they had a choice and had the opportunity to appoint a judge, would be like Trump does in the United States and every president before him, try to ensure that the judge who is appointed is a judge that reflects their own political thinking. And we need to move away from that. When we move away from that and we have an elections commission that is not based on loyalty to political parties, I think you've got a better opportunity for an elections commission that will run a proper elections. And for me, that's where the process has to start. The business of doing an audit of this election, yes, that would be useful to see all of the things that went wrong. But one of the things you will find that went wrong is that your commissioners were made up of political protectionists. So what do you do about that? You have to start there. Lowenfield and Mingo were products of that system. They were appointed into it because they were political operatives. Now, if the commission were not a commission of political people, we wouldn't have political operatives in there. And there may even come a point when, just as in organizations like financial intelligence units and SACU, as it's called in Guyana, people have to go through polygraph tests to determine whether in fact you really are a member of the PNC or a member of the PPP, and who would you support if you were in this job. Maybe even that is necessary in order to ensure that what you have as elections machinery is something that is truly professional, something that is going to run an election in the interest of the people of Guyana, casting their votes, and at the end of it, the will of the majority prevails in terms of who is elected.
Correct.
That would be where I would start. So,
yeah. Indeed.
But Peter, I know wanted to respond to something I said about young people.
Thank you. And Peter, I would like if you could also educate us in terms of what's happening around the Caribbean or in countries that you might be, your own country, for example, Barbados, that you might be more intimate with. How do they appoint an elections commissioner or the chief elections officer? What can Guyana learn? Or is it that there is problems like this all over the place?
Yeah. No, I heard the comments made by Saron, which were consistent with a lot of the comments that were made by the CARICOM report, and the suggestion that we need to find a new way to do these appointments and whatnot. And I must admit that I think it's well intentioned. Saron, I have the greatest of respect for your intellect and the genuineness with which you are speaking. My concern is that I just don't know how it's going to be possible. In Barbados, the election commission is made up of 3 people, and there are 2 from one political party. 5 people, 2 from one political party, 2 from the other political party, and 1 from that the Governor General is chosen on the appointment of the Prime Minister. The thing about it is that it works. And to technically speaking, the arrangement that you have in Guyana, which forces the opposition leader to choose to nominate a person and then the president to agree on it, in a sense, makes the Guyana Elections Commission even more fair than the vast majority in every other country, because I mean, in St. Kitts and Trinidad and whatnot, the Prime Minister essentially appoints the person that has a casting vote, which is the chair. What we do is that we ensure that their appointment doesn't run according to an election term, so that you essentially have a carryover from the previous administration, which essentially makes them non-political to some extent. But that's exactly how it is done. So I wish anyone who changes it well. I would be anxious to see the new formulation that will come up. But it's going to be hard. I mean, it took a long time to get Justice Singh, largely because you needed to have a person that both sides could agree on. And when I hear people saying, well, we need to have more independent commissioners on the Elections Commission, I say, but how are they going to get there? This idea that has been put forward just now, that we can have Chancellor of University of Guyana and private sector and whatnot. The problem in Guyana is that everybody is so political that I don't know how that process is going to work without saying, well, you know, the president of the private sector association is Dr Yog, and everyone assumes that he supports PPP Civic, even though I don't really know that he's political. So it's going to be a challenge to get it done, and I wish them well. My difficulty is with Lowenfield and Mingo. To the best of my knowledge, these are public servants who have been appointed because they have years of experience. Essentially, they were appointed to jobs. In Barbados, we have the chief elections officer, supervisor of elections. She's appointed in the same way that the CEO would have been appointed. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we had a character who was appointed in much the same way, and then he went rogue as well. My thing is, how do we have a situation where we can ensure that if these people who are public servants, who are independently appointed, go rogue, how do we pull them back? And I think that when I hear Saran talking about polygraph testing and whatnot, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe we don't interrogate them enough in terms of the interviews that they're given. But we have to remember that these people are public servants. You know, Lowenfield is one of the most experienced people with elections in the region. And I mean, the system seemed to work very well before, but for some reason, he ran into a difficulty where his political colors started to show in ways that were absolutely vulgar. So that's the other thing. Now, I want to just make a quick point about the PNC and so on. In most Caribbean countries, you have 40% of people supporting both political parties, and you have 20% that ultimately determines the outcome of an election. In Guyana, it's worse. You have 45% of people supporting both political parties, and you have 10% of people dealing with the outcome of an election. I agree with Saran entirely that the PNC is extremely popular because the PNC still secured 45% of the total popular vote. And those are people who are PNC loyalists and are fanatical about the PNC. And that's not going to change in any hurry. So the next election, you will have that. The challenge is that, and I have this difficulty when I talk to my clients in the Caribbean about elections, you cannot win an election on 45% of the population. You need to have that 10%. And in the United States of America, Saran lives there now, the conversation takes place among those changeable voters at 20%. But for some reason in the Caribbean, we have a situation where almost every government believes that it is their responsibility to speak to the base. And that's what the PNC has been doing for many years, to speak to the base. And I agree, Forrest Burnham had some brilliant ideas. And certainly the loyalty that he has engendered continues to this very day. The problem is that by speaking to that base, you're not going to get anywhere. We need to speak to people who are among that 10%. And that's the reason why I do feel that the new parties, the smaller parties, do have a role in being able to say, let me dislodge that 20% and let me deliver it to whomever. And right now, that to me is really magic. Other than that, the PNC will continue. And I heard Robert Corbyn say it on more than one occasion. You know, we are going to continue speaking to our base, and we're going to continue entrenching ourselves as the opposition and getting the same 45%. And that's the challenge. We have to move past that, and we have to get to a point where we're able to gain more. And you see the last election outcome. The result is essentially a small swing in the other direction. And you know, you don't really have any major difference. And that's the nature of Caribbean politics. It doesn't move much more radically than that. And that's the reason why we need to speak to that 10%.
Correct. Thank you. Ossie Rogers, today, a couple of moments ago, Michael Kozak tweeted as follows: democracy rules in Guyana. Today, Mohamed Irfan Ali was sworn in as president, reflecting the will of the Guyanese people. We congratulate President Ali and we look forward to working with all to support Guyana's development for the benefit of its people. Mr. Rogers, you did a one-man protest in Philadelphia not too long ago. So two questions I have for you. Do you feel vindicated today, sir? Do you feel that your protest and the work you did in the diaspora there, was worth it? And secondly, Ossie, what do you see us Guyanese who live here? What can we do and what do we do going to the future with regards to you guys who are over there and who are lighting and fanning the flames of this harmony in Guyana? And I don't mean you. I do not mean you, but I mean Guyanese brothers and sisters who are now citizens of the US that use social media to fan the flames of racial and political disharmony. What can we as Guyanese who live here and are affected by that do, sir?
All right, so as it relates to whether I'm vindicated or not, I am contented for the outcome. It was the outcome that we were working for. And again, I think we need to remember that the fight for Guyana or to save Guyana democratic practices started when Mingo started his little magical with his magic fingers. And from then, Guyanese were always, once we Guyanese that live overseas, we're always involved, most of us, involved in what is actually going on in Guyana. Because, and it would, like I said before in one of these programs, it is evident based on the lineups you see at the Western Union and those other places. Because as Guyanese, we remain connected to our Guyanese, to Guyana. So there are tons, while I did that one man stand up there to thank Mike Pompeo, it was just me there, but I was not there by myself. I had tons and tons of people here in the United States and in Canada and the rest of the Caribbean and the rest of the world who were standing with me. I'm sure if I had advertised it, there were going to be tons of people who was going to take that journey with me to Philadelphia to stand with me. Because Guyanese outside of Guyana and Guyanese inside of Guyana, we're passionate. And that's why we have that issue with the whole divide in Guyana too, because Guyanese, we're passionate about our politics. And I see it on both sides. It doesn't matter what is being said of the other, of your side. For most of well, not most, a lot of Guyanese, it doesn't matter what is being said. They are steadfast in their belief in their party. So, that it's a good thing, and it could be, and it's a bad thing also. I forgot the second part of the question that you asked me. I'm sorry.
That's right. I think you answered it. You answered it very well, Sir Ronald. Any comments with regards to those sentiments, sir? Those concerns.
All that I would say is that Mr. Rogers should know that Guyanese are not alone in being having a very passionate diaspora. Peter will tell you that there are Barbadians abroad who would like to determine where streetlights go in Barbados, even though they live in New York and have probably lived there for 40 years. I can tell you that in Antigua, when I was High Commissioner in London, and also in my sojourn as ambassador to Washington, there are Antiguans and Barbudans who feel that they should tell the government what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And they feel equally passionate about their countries. Now, some of them are also equally politically divided between one political party or the other, and they reflect that position. So you're not different. That's the point I'm making. The diaspora is like that everywhere. The root is more important than the branch. And those people who come from countries will always come from those countries. They may live somewhere else in their bodies, but in their heart and in their head, they're at home. And that's what they're concerned about. Constantly, that is what occupies them. I had to tell the Antigua and Barbuda Association in London, which was made up of people who had been going to Britain since the 1950s, that they were in danger of becoming extinct because migration had stopped from Antigua to the United Kingdom, and they had not found a relevance for their children and their grandchildren who were born in Britain about Antigua. And as far as those children and grandchildren were concerned, that was a place they visited for holidays. It was very nice and all of that, but they wanted to get back to London or to Leicester or wherever they came from. So all of these diaspora organizations, what happens is because Guyana continues to feed them every year, more and more people migrate from Guyana. I hope, in fact, that if circumstances do change and the economy does improve, that more and more qualified Guyanese and Guyanese people will remain at home. That way, there'll be less for the diaspora to do and more for the people at home to do. And some of the diaspora who've started doing it already will start to go home and leave these places where in many of these places they aren't welcome. And they feel discomforted. And if they can find a niche at home in a Guyana that is economically prosperous and growing, great. But I tell you one thing that did worry me throughout the last 150 days about the diaspora. I have never seen such vulgar racism in my entire life as I saw being expressed by people on both sides of the racial divide in Guyana, abroad. It was disgusting. I was ashamed of it. I could not believe that so-called intelligent people were writing that kind of nastiness, and there was no other word that I could use to describe it. It was vulgar, it was racist in the extreme, it was unnecessary. And here's a significant thing. While they were doing that in the diaspora, people in Guyana were going about their lives. Indians and Africans and people of Chinese and Portuguese descent and others were selling in the marketplace just as they were doing every day, wandering into each other's shops, everybody's scared of COVID in exactly the same way. It wasn't representational of what was happening in Guyana. So there was I felt a deep sense of shame about it and deep concern. So I am sure, Mr. Rogers, that you must have experienced that too at first hand. But it is not something that should be encouraged. And in fact, one of the things that this new government in Guyana ought to start doing is finding ways in which it addresses that diaspora abroad in a constructive and productive way that tries to dismiss, if they can, this element of racism that seems to be so deeply rooted in them.
Thank you, Sir Ron. And just before Mr. Gildarie comes on, Leonard, I have a question for you.
You asking me a question now? Or go ahead.
Yes. Today, the Department of Political Information, they printed some photos that is not of APNO AFC. Anyway, jokes aside, I see some of our viewers and listeners wonder what the Guyana RAG will publish tomorrow. And just for Peter and Sir Ronald Sanders and Ossie Rogers to know, gentlemen, I said today on air that I will stop calling the Guyana RAG when I see it change its habit. The Guyana RAG Guyanese is known as the Guyana Chronicle. Leonard, over to you, my brother.
Thank you very much, sir. I want to ask the gentleman if it's too early to say that there's already been a play on the leadership of the People's National Congress. Why do I say that? Harmon has issued a statement after one or two would have been issued by the office of President or the outgoing President, David Granger. And then also Rickford Burke from the diaspora would have made it very clear that he failed as a president. He had a failed presidency. Is it too early? So there's also been calls for Aubrey Norton to take the reins of the People's National Congress. Would you say that it's already a play on the leadership of the party?
Peter, you want to go first?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm agreeing entirely. For Burke's posture regarding President Granger was the case from soon after the last election, and indeed before. When I had done my poll in Guyana, one of the challenges I identified was the leadership of President Granger. This was even before the election. And I got a sense that certainly there were supporters within that group that understood his weaknesses. His weaknesses have become profound. And it's not surprising that essentially leadership has been taken over by Harman during the course of the fight that came after the election. He was in many ways a figurehead, and I do believe that he will either voluntarily step down or alternatively will be unseated during the course, one would say relatively soon, because he cannot take a fight to the PPP and the Rick for Burks of this world will continue to work on, because they were never happy before. So it's not surprising me that they aren't now.
Thank you. And Sir Ron, Ossie, I'll come to you last. Sir Ron, I just want to put the same question to you, but from a slightly different perspective. As you know, Sir Ronald, the Guyana's constitution, our laws prohibit the entry or swearing into the National Assembly people who hold dual citizenship. However, that practice has been, accommodated before. It came to the fore now. Could the leadership of the PNC conceivably be a person who holds dual citizenship? And does that bode well then for a party that wants to revamp, re-energize itself for a 2025 election?
Well, I hope it never happens. And I'll tell you why. Not just for the PNC, for any political party or anybody who has to manage your government. The problem with being a dual national is that you have certain obligations to the country, to both countries. And it is not inconceivable that the second country to which you continue to retain citizenship and therefore some obligation, it is not inconceivable that ways could be found that could apply pressures upon you in certain circumstances when needed by that country to achieve a result. So I have toyed with this question myself in other countries, not just in Guyana. We toyed with it in Antigua too, where we had people who were citizens of Canada or the United States or London or England wanting to become government ministers and parliamentarians. And in fact, some of them did until they were challenged in the courts. And then the court found that they couldn't be because the Constitution forbids it. And I think the Constitution forbids it with good reason. And the reason is that you can't have loyalty to two sovereigns. If you do, there is an enormous amount of pressure on you. And why would you want to be in any event? If you're the leader of a political party in Guyana, why would you want to retain citizenship of some other country? It doesn't make sense. The only reason you could want to do that is for your own convenience and your own benefit. It certainly would not be in the interest of the country. So no, I personally, I think it has huge problems and the constitutions were written in the way they were for those very good reasons, acknowledging that you cannot serve God and Mammon. I think that's the phrase, isn't it, Peter? And in this case, if you're a citizen of the United States, which might be conceived to be God, you can't be serving Guyana as well. And the same applies if you're Canadian or British or whatever. So for me, no, they would continue to be disqualified. And it's inconceivable for me that Guyanese people would wish for such a thing to happen.
Thank you, Sir Ronald. Ossie Rogers, you worked with state media. You have seen, therefore, what the state media became under a PPP government. You were part of it. You have certainly seen what the state media became under a APNO AFC coalition government. And I think you didn't like what it became. What does Ossie Rogers, a former state media personnel, want to see as the role of the state media in a new government?
Well, I've heard the argument that the state, the state should get rid of the Guyana Chronicle and the National Communications Network. I maybe because of my ties to both of those agencies, I do not support that. One thing I must say though, it was alleged that the PPP during its time in office had a certain control over the state media, but working in state media, I could tell you that that's not true. I hosted a radio program called Afternoon Delight on the Voice of Guyana. Used to be broadcast Monday to Friday. And the person that was frequent on my radio program was former Prime Minister Hamilton Green. He was mayor of Georgetown at the time. He came on my program more than anyone else. And no one at office of the president or anywhere ever called me and say that Mr. Green is not welcome at the National Communications Network or anything like that. When I worked with the Guyana Chronicle, it was the same thing. I had an interest in the way the city was managed. I lived in Toronto. And I'm like, why can't we get it the same way? Why do we have to live in this garbage city? So because of my personal interest in that, I took on City Hall. And because of that, I interacted with many people at City Hall who were PNC people. But the intention was to get them to get the city cleaned up and stuff like that, and to highlight the issues that they were facing. And like I said before, no one tried to influence me on how to get it done or anything like that. But it's public knowledge now that the Guyana Chronicle and the National Communications Network, they were influenced by the Department of Public Information. We've seen the issue that Mr. Imran Khan and had with Mr. Brummel, because of how they wanted to take that control. It can work. My point is that it can work if we have responsible people in place. But that's the thing. These guys went in there with a vendetta, and all they tried to do, they tried to keep out, especially the AFC people. They tried to keep out and to try to attack the PNC people all the time just because of a personal vendetta. And that is why they were always taking this hardline party line.
But Ossie, Peter, Peter, isn't that always going to be the issue here? And Peter, in asking you this question, I'm going to also ask you to kindly wrap up and give us your, what you would say to President Ali at this stage. But Peter, just before you do that, isn't it always a problem? The state is always going to use a state media to push its own political, not necessarily state agenda.
No, I mean, that's entirely the case. I think Saram is probably a better person to answer this because he has more exposure to media in the Caribbean. But I guess he would do it last. So I'll leave it to him. But it's a challenge in virtually every single Caribbean country, especially where the landscape is so small, the media landscape, and you have one big player and it's a state player. But I have to admit that the Guyana Chronicle is bad. It's not garden variety bad. It's pretty bad. I wanted to quickly touch on this whole question of citizenship, though, and I want to differ with Saran slightly because I honestly, I mean, we have had a Prime Minister of Barbados that had dual citizenship, David Thompson, and I don't know that it was a huge problem. My challenge with it is I think a person who goes after American citizenship by way of a green card and applies is different to a person who is entitled to it. I mean, I'm entitled to citizenship other than Barbados by marriage. If I were to take it up and then I were to decide to renounce it, I can also take it back up again. And I think that is the challenge where you say to a person, in order to become a member of parliament, you have to renounce your citizenship. If the person has that by marriage, by birth, or by some other mechanism, and they say, okay, they will renounce it for the purposes, then they can always pick it back up again. I do feel we live in a dynamic world in the Caribbean where the diaspora is extremely large, and there's so many people that have contacts that want to be able to move back and forward. And I think it would be a pity if this were to be enforced more rigorously. And as I said, in Barbados, we have actually reduced because we had a provision once that you couldn't go in the Senate if you were a dual citizen, if you hadn't lived in Barbados for the last 5 years. And that was one of the first parts of the Constitution that was changed when the government was changed last time. It really is not a big deal in Barbados, but I have noticed that in several other countries, it's a huge problem, and it's something which people have adhered to. So I'll listen to Saron. Thanks to guys for being inviting me on the program. I've enjoyed this course with you. I'm happy that we've had a happy ending finally, and I look forward to hearing Saron's views on the whole question of media, regional media.
Thank you.
If I may, first of all, on the citizenship question, Peter is right. He did have a prime minister who was a dual citizen, but he was a dual citizen because he was born in the country of which he was a dual citizen. It wasn't a matter of choice. He wasn't a Barbadian who went out to seek another citizenship. He was born in that country. So he became a citizen through no choice of his own. Eddie Seaga was the Prime Minister of Jamaica, as you remember. He was also born in the United States. So the fact that he was born there wasn't a choice that he made to become a citizen of that country. In any event, he gave it up. Similarly, Lester Bird, the Prime Minister of Antigua, was born in the United States because that's where his mother was when he was born. But he came back to Antigua at the age of 6 months, and he spent his entire life in Antigua. But he too gave up the citizenship once he decided he was going to run for Prime Minister. And I think Seaga made the right decision. Bird made the right decision. You cannot be a prime minister of a country or leader of a party and have some other government capable of turning a screw on you in some way or another. So that would remain my position. And I would simply point out that those experiences where we've had prime ministers in the Caribbean who have been dual citizens, it was not a question of their seeking it. It was a question of their being born into it. So, and subsequently, at least in the case of those two, they discarded it. Now, on the question of the state media, look, state media can function quite independently, depending on whether the people who are running it have the courage and the guts to stand up to anybody who tells them what they should or should not do. I had the privilege of running the Guyana Broadcasting Service. I was 25 years old when I became the general manager of the Guyana Broadcasting Service. And I was its general manager for 3 years. And perhaps my youth is what benefited me, because I was too young to care about anything other than the principles and values which I thought were important to journalism. So anybody who would suggest to me that I should do something which was contrary to my own training and beliefs found an answer of resistance from me. And that resistance was total. Now, it could be that somebody older than me who was worried about looking after their family and their children and sending them to school may take a different position. But I come back to the point that state media could be useful if the people who run it are truly independent and given an opportunity to be independent. But what I don't understand is why we need state media at all, frankly, particularly as you have such a multiplicity of media in Guyana, for instance. You have a multiplicity of TV stations, a multiplicity of radio stations, so many newspapers, I'm sure hardly anybody reads them. But if that is and they're going after a very small advertising cake, the result of which is they're earning less and less money. They're paying their people less and less money. So they don't even have good professional people working for them who can deliver the goods because they're paying them next to nothing money. Is that right, Leonard? But the point I'm making here is that the state really ought to get out of the media. That's not to suggest that they can't continue to sell their message to the people of the country, but they must do that by all sorts of interpersonal communications. Do it through Parliament. Do it by holding press conferences. Do it by public meetings. In the same way they campaign to get elected, go out and campaign to sell your government message. There's no state for the media to be worshiping at the feet of ministers. Look, in Barbados, and Peter will confirm this if he wishes to, you can have CBC television. Every day on CBC television, you see the same people. It's always a ministerial story. It's always a minister. And from the time the government changes, it's still the minister, just the minister of a different party. So I remember the Barbados Advocate, for instance, used to run a photograph of a particularly attractive female minister for all of the entire period of her being in office. And she was a pin-up girl. And as soon as the government changed and she was no longer there, they found another pin-up girl in the party that came into power. So, and that incidentally was a so-called independent newspaper, not a government newspaper. But these things happen. But it boils down to whether you establish a truly independent operation as a state media, and whether the people you appoint have the courage to stand up for the values of the profession which they've joined. You want to be a broadcaster? You want to be a journalist? Well, then you have to understand that it comes with courage. Look, you see, Peter Wickham, one of the most courageous men I know, that his capacity for standing up for principle and right, regardless of who tells him, and he's walked away from jobs and he's walked away from columns because people have tried to tell him what to do. Now, Peter, in my view, would be the ideal man to run a state media because he wouldn't take foolishness and he'd ensure that it does the right thing.
Indeed. Indeed. Sir Ronald Sanders, thank you. Ossie Rogers, 30 seconds. Your words to Miss Dr. President Irfan Ali.
Well, before I do that, I want to first congratulate you, sir, and Mr. Gildarie, and the entire CADRES team for putting all of the issues out there on a daily basis and always having your information at your fingertip. As a journalist myself, I wonder how you guys do it every single day. And I want to congratulate you guys for doing that and for standing for democracy. I know for a fact, because Mr. Gildarie especially has done it before at CADRES News. I know you guys are going to be holding Irfan and the entire government to the wheel and ensure that the goods are delivered for the Guyanese people.
Thank you.
So I want to say thank you for that. And also I just want to wish Dr. Ali well. I know him and I know that he is a person that has zero tolerance for racism. We have a issue with racism in the country, and I know that he's the ideal man at the wheel right now to bring our people together. I am very passionate about that, and I really look forward for our country going back to that way where we used to celebrate as one people again. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winston Rogers, Ossie Rogers. Peter Wickham, 30 seconds. Your words to Mr. Dr. President Irfan Ali.
Yeah, well, certainly congratulations to Dr. Irfan Ali. I don't know him like the other gentlemen. I know that he's a young, bright person, and certainly at 40 years old, he's done well to achieve what he's achieved. I think for him, he needs to focus on the New Testament, and if he's not of a Christian belief, a similar writing in the Bhagavad Gita or in the Quran. The reality is that I think forgiveness and inclusion have to be the watchwords that he practices. And I agree certainly with the other panelists that, you know, the idea of inclusion, bringing the country together and healing the wounds, those need to be number one for him. But congratulations to him. I really do wish him all the best. And I look forward to a brighter, more prosperous Guyana over the next 5 years.
Thank you. And on that note, let me also say and remind everyone, Irfan Ali, President Ali, will actually be the first Muslim president of Guyana. And Sir Ron will correct me about the region. But he is certainly the first Muslim Islamic president, Muslim, let us say, president of Guyana. Sir Ron, your final words, sir. We got a minute to go.
Well, what I would say is I wish President Ali all the success in the world, because his success will be Guyana's success. If he fails, I'm afraid Guyana has an awful future. If he succeeds, he would have done what I said at the beginning of this program, which is to set Guyana's feet on a ladder of expectation of progress and prosperity. What he has to ensure is that he has an inclusive government, as Peter suggested, that his policies for Guyana are inclusive, that he ensures that no race is left behind.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Ronald Sanders, Mr. Ossie Rogers, and Mr. Peter Wickham. Thank you all, gentlemen, for being here in room 592 with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us in room 592. It's been a pleasure to have you on this Sunday night special, room 592, and we certainly look forward to your company tomorrow at 1:30 for what may very well be the final episode of our Elections Watch. We're still going to call it Elections Watch tomorrow, but it might very well be the wrap-up session of our Elections Watch. Mind you, the work of building, healing Guyana continues thereafter, but certainly it may morph into a new program, and we may want to say our goodbye to Elections Watch tomorrow. But that is on tomorrow under the good guidance and leadership of Mr. Leonard Gildarie. Mr. Gildarie, we'll be seeing you at 1:30 tomorrow, sir.
Yes, thank you very much, and we have much to talk about. By Jagdeo, he seems to be never going away. So let's talk about that and so many other things.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been great to have you here with us tonight in room 592, and we look forward to continue our discussion with you all tomorrow night in room 592 when we expect to have Mr. Tony Astafan, as you know, senior counsel from across the OECS. We're going to have no other than our DLM, our brother who has been with us before, Mr. Paul Nehru, Tennessee, and we're hoping to be joined by the head of the AFC for some message tomorrow, Mr. Kemrad Ramjatan. So we'll be certainly having a great night tomorrow in room 592. And meanwhile, until then, when we meet you again and we have our discussion again, in the meantime, you stay safe. Remember, COVID-19 is still out there, and you can be as safe as you want to be depending on your own choice of action. So ladies and gentlemen, be safe. And as I say to you every night when we have our closure here, do a prayer for this beautiful country of ours. It is still the best country in the world, even though Peter might want to agree with us at this stage, but we can still say it. It is still the best country in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, be safe. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye now. Thank you.